Shit. Oh, why do I cough every time I'm trying to record lately? Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Nightmares Within, the new Guild Wars 2 patch just went live. I'm going to give you guys an overview of what exactly the content is here. And we're going to do this in 4 sections, okay? Because ArenaNet always do a bit more of the living story and then they do more stuff on the side as well. So 4 sections. First, I'm going to give you all a story so far. Too many people don't want to play living story patches because, oh, I don't really know what's going on in the story. So we're going to do a story so far. I'm going to talk to you about the Nightmares Within stuff to do with the living story. We're going to do section 3 on just general changes for the game, which there aren't that many, honestly. And section 4, I'm going to talk about the next patch too, because a lot of people are kind of confused at what it could be, but it looks pretty obvious to me. But, okay, so, section 1. And let me know if the section idea works quite well. Section 1. So at the start of the year, of course, we saw, the beginning of the living story, we saw the Molten Alliance, unification of the Dredge and the Flame Legion Char, okay? And it was said back then during that patch, though we stopped many of their activities, they continued to be an alliance, and it was said that they were brought together by a mysterious city dweller, and that was sort of something hanging over the players' heads for a long period of time. Later on in the year, we saw the introduction of the Aether Blades, the Sky Pirates, okay? This, again, was actually another alliance. This was the alliance of the Inquest and the Sky Pirates of Tyria. They had been unified and they combined their technologies and their ways to basically form the Aether Blades. This was another alliance we saw. Further down the line, Scarlet Briar, a new character for the living story, attacked Divinity's Reach during the Queen's Jubilee, and it turned out she was working with the Aether Blades, and she had her own, you know, mechanized creations, these giant twisted watchwork things. And it sort of became apparent Scarlet was responsible for the Aether Blades existing. Last patch, we saw another alliance form, the Toxic Alliance. This is an alliance between the Crate and the Nightmare Court. And the premise behind this alliance is that the Nightmare Court somehow were going to help the Crate bring about their profits. The Crate have this very strict religion, and a mindset that basically explains why they're so evil, and they have never communicated with us before. The Crate believe that their profits will one day return to Tyria to flood the world. This is their prophecy. And this new alliance formed, and the Nightmare Court were basically saying, yeah, we can make this happen. Together, this new alliance, the Toxic Alliance, built a huge tower in Kessex Hills. This is what happened last patch, and it started raining toxins down on everyone, but we couldn't go into the tower. Right, cue Nightmares Within. That's this new patch. It went live a couple of hours ago, and now we get to go inside. And everything I just told you in the story so far is relevant. Okay, so the patch itself, overall, I would say it's thoroughly enjoyable. I had a bit of a weird up-down with this patch coming, because at first I was like, oh, this could be this crazy cool open world dungeon, and then I was like, oh, it's probably going to be more of the same, and it's not going to be very, very fun. And then I went in game, and I'm happy to say it is a really fun open world dungeon. I could just be buzzing because I've just come off of the patch, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I very much recommend, if you haven't played a couple of the living story things recently, because maybe you're a little bit tired of, you know, just next to dungeon path, or that kind of mini instance type content, play this one. It's very different to any of the other living story patches we've had so far, in that it adds another significant new area for us to play, a new zone of the map, and you may have problems with the fact this is only temporary, and in a while it will be removed, but that's all the more reason to experience it while you can. The tower is not a small 5-man thing, it's a huge open world dungeon, and this is the other thing, from the trailer of this patch, I thought it was going to be quite small. I don't know why, it looked kind of small to me. This place is really, really big. It's a significant size zone, and as you imagine, it's a tower, it's got lots of verticality to it. And it consists of generally 3 floors, and each one's got a theme, okay? So, and I say 3 floors, but we're talking like large sort of platforms that in themselves, you know, you're going up and up and up. So the 3 floors each have a different theme. The first one is basically full of these mines. The second one is full of spiders. It's kind of a very spidery area. And the third one is full of toxins. You know, this idea of the toxins that were around the tower last patch. Your health is constantly draining in the 3rd floor unless you go to specific safe areas where the alliances of Tyria have set up air purifiers. And the general experience, at least right now when the patch is new and fresh, is you are charging through this huge tower, a very large instance with tons and tons of other players. You know, you're out in overflows, these are full maps, and you can see all of these players. We are invading the tower. You know, a lot of the living story stuff recently, it's been, oh, Tyria's being invaded by the Mad King, it's being invaded by the Bloody Prince, it's been invaded by Scarlet Briar. No, this time we're the ones invading, and you really do feel like that. You've got so many players around your sides as you're sort of pushing up and climbing the tower. That feeling will go away as time goes on, I'm afraid, because Obviously, the patch is new right now. Loads of people are trying it out. In a week's time, there will be less people. So if you are going to play it, I'd certainly say try and get that experience now. That maybe a little bit will be shown in the footage in the background. But that is a really cool feeling of sort of flooding through this tower and rising higher and higher. And as you get higher, the tower gets more difficult. First of all, the kind of idea that we're invading is kind of weird sometimes. Like, I said that the first floor is full of mines. That doesn't work very well when you've got an army of players charging through, because someone ahead of you is going to trigger a mine, walk out of its range, and they'll be safe, but then they're responsible for it blowing up and killing like 5 people behind them, which is quite funny to see, but maybe a little bit unintuitively designed. But as you progress up the tower, more and more players get picked off, because it really does get quite difficult up there. Each floor, because it's got a different theme, they have different dynamic events that are popping around there. Like, you want to save people, there are different champions that spawn in the area, so they're actually pretty good for getting champion boxes and just finding nice loot within this new patch. So I do expect a fair amount of activity in the tower, but it's difficult. It really is, and I felt like a complete badass. I've got to say, towards the end, where the numbers were really thin, there weren't very many players around at all, and you're running around with like your specific build. Like, I did it. I'm not saying it's stupidly hard. I managed to do this all with entirely DPS gear, and my spec wasn't particularly defensive either, but I was managed to weaving in and out, and more people were dying. It's so packed with enemies towards the end that you come out right at the end of the tower. At the very top, there's a huge, thin, long gangway. It's very cinematic. It's really cool. But as you get there, because the tower's got so difficult, the footage will show I'm sort of backpedaling up, and there are armies and armies of crate and enemies bursting at the seams, trying to chase us up this plank, and, there are people dying down there, but you're just slowly backpedaling up and up and up, and, it feels really good to have managed to get away. As you climb the tower, it is difficult, but I wouldn't say it's on the frustrating level. I died maybe once or twice to a giant champion spider because I was going the wrong way. But otherwise, they're pretty good with stopping it being frustrating, because each time you reach one of these new plateaus, one of the 3 floors, you get to find these little golems that will allow you to teleport back to the area. Think about some of the jumping puzzles that are in this game, where you get to a certain threshold, and if you fall off, then you can speak to a golem and it will teleport you back forward. It's the exact same system here in the tower, but it does come with a small fee, but that's fine, because you're basically waypointing, in my opinion, so that's fine that it's got a small fee. But yeah, it's very much an experience of an attritive grind, not grind, but, it's an attritive climbing up the tower. Slowly your health's getting lower, slowly your allies are thinning out. And I speculated on a visual word 2 weeks ago, where I first talked about this idea of a large open world dungeon. I really liked the idea of this, because if it was big enough, you'd have these cool little experiences where you're really high up and there aren't many people, and you stop for a break, and then you find someone new there, and you're like encouraged to talk to them, because you're like, oh wow, you made it up here high, kind of thing. And I can't say this patch gives you that feeling exactly, but there was a moment, and it's here in the footage, there was a moment where I was climbing quite high up, and I saw an ArenaNet dev was quite high, and it was just sort of me and him in this small area, and it had a bit of that feeling for me. It really did. So I found it, if not completely mind-blowingly good, at least a different experience to what most of the living story's given us in Guild Wars 2, which has been a combination of small instance zones or large Zergy farm patches. This has been a different experience, and I very much commend it for that. And as well, if you're like, a lot of people ask for more stuff that they can do as guilds, right? One thing I noticed as I was climbing the tower that a lot of people tended to do is they would have like one player there with their comm tag on, and a huge zerg of players would sort of be balling up around them, because they know they're safer if they're in this huge ball. So there's opportunities here for guilds to get together and say, right, we're going to climb the tower. They have one person, they put their tag on, and then your guild sort of moves together as a unit through the tower and kills everything on your way. That's a really good feeling, and that's something that Guild Wars 2 hasn't offered to guilds in many situations, and it was nice to see that. So anyway, you get to the top of the tower, and you're going to find a chest there, which you can open by forging a tri-key, I think they call it, a key made of 3 colours, each colour basically representing one of Scarlet's alliances. And it's got some good loot in it. It's got some, you're guaranteed at least a champ box, which is really nice. There's that guarantee. There's also an RNG thing in there, where sometimes you'll get an above-ground aquatic breather, or even better stuff. I believe the back piece only comes from that chest, and so does like an exclusive mini to this patch. So you're often going to be finding yourself getting back to the top of the tower so that you can open this chest, and it does feel very rewarding. They even have an achievement tied to opening that chest, so it does feel very good to get to that chest. But also you're going to find a pod up there, an area that you can walk into that will load you into a small instance, okay? Which you can either do solo, or you can do with a party of people. It will scale depending. This is sort of the other half of what this patch makes up, okay? It's not all just the open world dungeon. Within the dungeon, there are loads of these pods. There's a series of them. I think there's 9. There's an achievement to go inside every single one. By entering them, you basically have to complete a little mini-mission that will involve many of the characters we have come to know through the Living Story this year. You know, Bram, Rox, Lady Casimir, Marjorie Delacroix, and even more. The thing is, these pods aren't directly in your way as you climb the tower. They're always just, they're not exactly hidden, but they are off the beaten road. You're going to have to make an effort to go and find these pods as you climb the tower. You're also unlikely to be able to enter every single pod on your first route through the entire tower, because there's a mechanic here where sometimes the pods are open in one area of the tower, and then sometimes they're open in a different area of the tower. You know, it's randomized which ones are there. They're always marked by a gold star, so sometimes you'll find a pod, but it'll be closed, and they say, we don't understand why it's closed, but it is. You're going to have to come back later or find a different one. And this might seem frustrating to some people, but it's actually quite good, because it stops people going through the tower just the once, and then constantly using that same golem that's near the top of the tower to skip everything, and then everything else becomes empty, and players who are going through in a week have a really difficult time. This safeguards against that. It means you can't just climb the tower once and be done. You climb the tower, you do the majority of stuff, you get a nice reward at the top, but you've always got incentive to now go back down to the lower floors and explore and try and find these pods once you know that they're open. Now, what's inside the pods usually is just sort of a small progression through a couple of rooms, but the enemies you fight are different, the characters that are there are different, and the voiceovers are different, and in the final room, often you're going to be in a larger encounter, which features a different enemy each time. ArenaNet have said on the releases page that these are, like, kind of random. I don't know how many different iterations there are, whether there's only 9 to match the fact there are 9 pods you can enter on the outside, or whether, you know, there's 3 potential things you can get within any pod. I don't know just yet. Minor spoiler, if you care, skip ahead, I don't know, maybe 20 seconds. One of the pods I went into had Traherne for me to fight, and not only was he, you know, vaguely challenging, but when you kill him as well, you have to stomp him. I know from Twitter as well that Tybalt, the Order of Whispers character that everybody loves, also features in one of these mini instances. And the reason why this works, why these characters can be in these pods, is that it's hallucinations. That's the whole idea from Scarlet there. She's causing you to hallucinate, and as a result, ArenaNet can tap into any character they like from the franchise. And from those 2, at the very least, that I know about, that means some very interesting stuff could happen. So that's cool. Right at the top of the tower, though, is one final, like, big pod. This one doesn't turn on and off like the other ones. This one is always available. And that sort of serves as the large story instance for this patch. Last patch, the first time you zoned into Kessex Hills, you kind of had a mini mission that you got to play. This is the equivalent. It's right at the top of the tower. After you fall all your way up there, now you get the big story. And this mission is a little bit longer than the other pods, which are fairly smaller. And this one also features one of those interesting cutscenes we saw back during the Queen's Jubilee, I think was the last one we saw. This explains that Scarlet basically was the one to have orchestrated everything we've seen this year, okay? So she was behind the Molten Alliance, she was behind the Aether Blades, which we already knew, she was behind the attack on Divinity's Reach, and now she's behind this too. Now, I tell you this, and you might be thinking that sounds really redundant, we already knew. Like, if you look at her invasion, she's been attacking the world with all 3 of these alliances anyway, except for the Toxic Alliance, which is new. But we kind of knew this. However, I don't think it's redundant. I do think it's quite useful because it's one of those well-done cinematics that's going to get your average player watching, and it's going to get your regular player who doesn't watch videos like mine, who doesn't go out onto the forums and try and pay that much attention to see what's happening. It keeps these people in the loop, right? A lot of people don't care about the story in the Living Story right now, and this could be just that little bit more that gets people understanding what is going on and maybe why we should care. So after this cutscene, Scarlet basically leaves. We can't stop her from leaving. She just says, okay, toodle pips, I'll see you later. And she summons a huge toxic crate, like a hybrid crate thing that she herself has constructed. And the crate around her believe this to be one of their prophets that's come down. It's not, of course, they're just being manipulated by Scarlet and by the Nightmare Court. But nonetheless, they then try and fight you to defend it, and you have to kill them and this big boss at the end. What kind of annoyed me about this bit at the end is a crate starts talking in this cutscene. I don't know whether it's ever happened in the personal story before, but I don't remember it. The whole idea of the crate is like they just do not communicate with anyone else because they see all other races as completely below them. You know, like the Kodan, but times 10. They see them as so below them that they wouldn't even communicate with them. And then in this cutscene, we see like a crate starts talking and he sounds ridiculous. What I always liked about the Serpentine races bosses in this franchise was they always had cool names, like the Forgotten and the Naga. They always had lots of S's in their names. You know, it was Sicilisk and Valkis. And I always like the idea that they talk like snakes. And then we have the Crate, who are also a serpentine race, and this guy just sounded ridiculous. But anyway, you kill them. The giant boss at the end is a pretty fun fight. He keeps changing form as you go. He keeps getting bigger, and the idea is he's learning, I suppose. He's evolving, I believe is the term they use. And you kill him nonetheless. I did everything on my own. It was solo, and you're meant to be able to do it solo. That final boss was pretty difficult, though. There was a pretty clutch moment in one of the pods. I feel like the difficulty level for this patch is somewhat higher than the difficulty level has been, like, in terms of what the game expects from you in other patches. Especially, I feel like in a week's time, we could be having some real problems where latecomers to the patch are going to feel like they have to tackle this huge tower and there are no other players about at all. If you've got a guild, it shouldn't be a problem, but I can see that being an issue, definitely. Right at the end of the instance, after you killed this boss, Scarlet like appears again for one last second to say, "Oh, everything's going according to plan," and leaves. Like, we constantly beat her, we constantly set her back, constantly derail her plans, and every single time she just says, "Oh yes, this is exactly what I wanted to happen." Is that just crap that she's talking? Is she lying, or is this a part of a master plan? Are we somehow being manipulated? It would be nice if ArenaNet can pull through on that, but I'm not holding my breath. Right at the last second, after Scarlet leaves, you can interact with this device that injects antitoxin into the heart of the tower, and everybody says yay. You get to pick a reward. You get rewards for repeating the dungeon as well, should you wish to, and then you go back out to the top of the tower. What you'll notice when you log into the game, up in the top right hand corner, there's a progress bar. This is very similar to what we saw last year at Halloween when the Mad King was trying to break free. Basically, the idea is every time a player presses F at the end of that mission and injects more antitoxin, that's globally across all of Guild Wars 2 pushing this progress bar up. When it gets to the very top, we have succeeded and the tower will be destroyed. It will be completely pumped with antitoxin and no threat to us anymore. So this is kind of a meter showing us when the patch sort of ends, I guess, which means it could take longer than a month. Potentially. I actually like this feature as well. It's one of those things that they've done now that does make it feel like we, the players, are making a difference. You know, we're actually seeing, by us participating in the content, we are pushing this progress bar up, and that is causing the world to change. You know, it's much more significant than just, oh, play through all the canned content we've given you. It's also good, again, because it stops players from rushing in through the tower like I did today, and then never coming back. They don't want to encourage a culture in Guild Wars 2 where everybody rushes in at the update and then just all bails again straight away. So, I am in favour of it, and I'd like to see what exactly happens as they continue forward. That's about it for the patch. Those are the two halves of it, in my opinion. It's a bit grim and a bit like, you know, it doesn't look particularly pretty in there, but it is cool. I think another thing where I'd fault it is maybe Marjorie and Lady Casimir, who are sort of the two big characters for these patches. They didn't really have much to do. They were just there. But there was plenty of voice acting, and, you know, you got to hear a bit more of Scarlet, and she still grates on me terribly. But hey, it was engaging through and through. Alright, so let's go into section 3. This one will be much shorter, before we wrap up the video here. General changes that went into the game. There was a lot for SPVP. Well, compared to the other stuff in the patch, there was a lot in SPVP. There was actually something potentially quite significant. So, first of all, they added a new option for people with custom arenas. Custom arenas said to be this huge thing when they were originally announced for the game. I was always a bit pessimistic. Nobody really seems to care about them anymore. But they did give a new option for custom arenas. And this is people who own them can now force on respawn. Okay, force respawn is a new option. And what it means is that you cannot be hard-rezzed. If you die, if you get stomped, you have to wait until you can waypoint back to your base. Right now in PvP, if you're fully defeated, someone can still do what's called a hard res, where they res you up from you know, fully defeated, like you see in PvE happens all the time. I actually really enjoy that in PvP. I love hard resin. I love making res specs and, you know, having a strong enough character that can sort of hold a node and actually hard res someone up. It's incredibly rare and it's incredibly ridiculous, and you probably wouldn't see it in the highest of competitive matches. But it is another little element to the gameplay, and it's something that makes people laugh and go, "Oh, that's pretty cool" when it happens. But, you know, ArenaNet have added this. I wonder if eventually we'll see a shift to the arenas to have this option toggled on, which I think would be a shame. It would. It really would. Anyway, also, they said that solo arena players will now be shuffled around after matches. What that means, I'm not 100% sure, because I was under the impression they already were. But I guess this means that you might notice if you keep doing solo arena that sometimes it's just like the same team of like rank 50 pluses going in over and over and over again, and they just keep stomping you and it looks like they're sinking in. The truth is they're not. It's just the way that the matchmaking works sometimes, and it really sucks when that occurs. So here it looks like they're shuffling people around a little bit better, so that's nice. And the most significant change is they've changed the compass, okay? Now, if you see an enemy, that enemy appears on the minimap for you and for all of your teammates. Okay, so if I have just respawned and I see I've got an ally in mid and I've got an ally on far, and I see my one ally on far, I can now see how outnumbered they are. I can see, oh look, they've got 4 people attacking them, there's no point me going there, and I can go to mid straight away. What this means is you can much greater read the battlefield and tell where you should be roaming to without being in voice application softwares, which is nice, and that should help for stuff like solo arena, or, you know, more casual teams getting into the game. There's less that they have to communicate. I would argue you basically don't have to communicate anything at that point, but I know some people would disagree. Anyway, also, lastly, tiny little change for PvP, the trick-or-treat bags have now been removed from winning, but until December 10th, which I guess is going to be, you know, the next big patch to PvP rewards, there's actually going to be double chest rewards, which is nice. So if you haven't PvP'd for a while and you actually care about rewards, anyone serious into PvP doesn't care about the rewards, but still, you get double rewards, so there you go. In the Blackline store, there are now, they changed the gathering tools to not be soul-bound, but instead account-bound. Pretty cool. It's funny because I was just talking about how, you know, that completely makes a whole element of the gameplay arbitrary. You know, it removes this idea of, oh, I have to restock on harvesting equipment. At least originally, when they were soulbound, you could buy it for one character, but then, you know, that would still be a mechanic to focus on for your ults. No, now you just have to buy one from the gem store and you can swap it to any character, something I'm sure everybody's very happy about. And there's also a couple of new skins. They've added, like, the weapons of Marjorie and Lady Casimir, and there's a new finisher. So that's about it. Everything that's changed in the game. One final little section, as ever, when ArenaNet release a patch on their front webpage, for the next patch they release a single image, like a teaser of what's coming on. That very much looks to me like 3 different fractals. I think what we're going to be seeing is the update to the Fractal of the Mists next patch, which is going to be great. So if you guys don't remember, we're going to be getting a fractal of the Molten Facility, we're going to be getting a fractal of the Aetherblade Hideout, and we're going to get a fractal of the Thormanova Reactor, completely new, that we've never seen before, that you guys voted for back during the Cutthroat Politics update. This could have been when we got to see the human gods and Abaddon and so forth, but no, instead we get the Thormanova Reactor, which could be very exciting given some of the stuff we've talked about on this channel to do with the lore there before. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, we'll see whether that's true or not. I guess next time. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you played the patch, let me know what you think, whether it was any good, or it's still just not enthusing you, or, you know, maybe it sort of brought back your drive for the living story. Anyway, thanks, guys. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.